We're ready.
Are we?
Almost ready. Daniel's got to take a picture first. Okay. Hello everyone and welcome to... Oh God, it's really bright if you stand over here. Is that better? That's better for me. Hello everyone, welcome to Byte Book. So nice to see so many people here this evening. We have a full house, which is lovely to see. And great to be in the Hospital Club. We're really grateful to them to letting us host it here. It's such a nice venue. Everyone's been saying how nice it is. So thank you, Hospital Club. So this evening we're going to talk about what's your story, how to market your authors and their books, which of course is very relevant to our audience this evening. And I'm going to introduce our chair soon, who some of you will know, hopefully. I think practically everyone knows Hermione, but I'll introduce her in a second. But before I do that, I just have a couple of things to say. Please do tweet using the hashtag #ByteTheBook. You can tweet some questions up on here. So when you tweet, this refreshes and it should go up on the board here. So please do. It's quite good fun seeing your tweets come up. So do that, but there'll be time for some questions at the end. Our next event is on the 17th of June, and we're at the Groucho Club, and that's on the way forward. What does the future of culture and storytelling look like? So and that's sponsored by Frankfurt Book Fair, and I'll mention something else about Frankfurt in a moment. We also have another agent table. So our next agent tables is the 10th of July, and that's sold out. And as you know, they sell out really quickly. But they're fantastic, really popular. Julia actually helped me come up with the idea of them, and they've been absolutely fantastic. So we set up another event for September the 18th. So if you're an author with a manuscript that you're trying to get in front of agents, please do have a look at them. They're reduced for members. And so this evening, for example, was free for our members, or £25 for everyone else. So we try and do everything we can to help our members. We also have an allocation of free tickets to get into Frankfurt Book Fair, which is usually €140, and also London Book Fair, £45. So it's worth, and we do everything we can to promote our members and make introductions where we can. Lots of you know that about us. So it's usually £120 a year to be a member, but if you join this evening, it's £110, and you should see Rebecca. And she can sign you up. And we also have a mailing list if you don't feel like joining yet, but you want to keep up with what we're doing. Some of the Hospital Club maybe you haven't even heard of Byte the Book before. You just thought, well, that looks interesting. So you can join our mailing list. We also we're trying to promote our members in another way by running a short story every month in our newsletters. So if you've got any short stories that you want to send through to us, and we can put them up on the website. Usually below 1,500 words, but yeah, send them through, and we'll try and see what we can do. Trying to do one a month. So that's pretty much all of my things that I was going to say. I'd finally like to introduce our chair, the fabulous Hermione Island. Oh, the amazing Hermione, who lots of you know from the work she's been doing with us at Byte the Book and Byte Consultancy we set up a while ago, and she's generally just an amazing person. Her official biography is that she has worked in marketing and publishing for over 25 years, primarily in Dahl and Kindersley but also at Phaidon, and she's currently at Little Brown, and she works across lots of different genres at Little Brown. She's also chair of the trustees of a digital literacy charity called World Reader. She's passionate about marketing and helping authors to get their work out as widely as possible. And she's just an amazing superstar and a brilliant person in the network. So yeah, well done Hermione, thank you very much.
Thank you. So my mic's going off now. This is going to be the audience mic soon. I'm going to let you carry on.
Lovely, thank you. So, hello everybody. I'm very pleased to be welcomed this evening on the panel with three people who have a very interesting and different view from each other about marketing. So to my immediate left is Julia Silk. So she worked as an editor for 18 years, half of that time at Orion, and then became an agent in 2016. She works for Kingsford Campbell, who are a boutique agency which was set up in 2014, and she represents authors across the fiction spectrum, from commercial to literary, as well as a number of non-fiction writers. Current focus is health and well-being and memoir. She's a big fan of crime writing, true and fictional, and is still slightly obsessed with her first teen love, which is the 80s Bonkbusters. Further round to her left is Truda Spruyt, who is the practice director at For Culture, where she leads the PR team and heads up accounts, including the Man Booker International Prize and the Baillie Gifford Prize for Non-Fiction. She's been with the organisation since 2000, where the culture practice was originally a boutique agency called Coleman Getty, who some of us who've been in the publishing industry for years have known forever. Absolute legends. And she's also the chair of the Philosophy Foundation, co-founder of Borough Book Bash, and an arts emergency mentor. And finally, Kit Caless is the co-founder and publisher at Influx Press. He's written for many places, including Vice, The Guardian, New Statesman, Prospect, Architectural Digest, and he's most famous for his book, Spoons, Carpets and Appreciation, which he thinks he will never better, which is quite sad when you think about it. So we have an author and a publisher, we have a publicist, we have an agent, and my background is obviously marketing. You all come from different disciplines within the industry and have very different approaches to marketing. Can you tell us what you think the single most important thing that an author should do to market themselves is? I'm going to start with you, Julia.
I'm going to open my piece of paper. Well, I knew you'd do this, and I go, I know there's something really good. Well, for me, I guess the focus of marketing is about marketing yourself to the industry. The industry uses social media a lot. We use Twitter a lot, particularly for novelists. Instagram's also extremely popular, particularly for non-fiction writers. But I think it's about building a community, and to do that you have to feel comfortable. There are different platforms. You can explore those and you can work out where your place is and who find your people. You've got amazing tools at your disposal there, and it's just so different from how it was 10 years ago. I mean, I don't think I'd be here now if it wasn't for Twitter. I mean, that's not a kind of glib thing to say. I really don't think I would have been able to create the network that I have and get to where I am without being able to connect with all those people. And I also think it's about understanding what marketing is. I mean, I quite like to talk about as well, I mean, and I think these three people are going to have better insights into that than me, but I think that the lines between marketing and publicity have become quite blurred, and it all kind of comes under promotion now, and things that you don't necessarily know are paid for might be, and things that you don't realise that you can achieve without paying for them are kind of at your disposal in a way that they weren't. I guess I've strayed a bit from the question, but so it's about kind of how you promote yourself, but it's not about selling as such. So I think a really good example of this is I was looking at something the other day, and an editor who's on maternity leave was asking for people's recommendations. So she's a prolific reader, obviously, and she'd run out of things to read. And so people who know her and have connected with her were giving them recommendations. And then someone popped in and said, "Oh, you should read this," and it was clearly a link to their own self-published book. That's not how you connect with people. That's rarely a good idea. So it's kind of about being your authentic self and who you would be if you were chatting to someone at a party. You want to market yourself. It's not about marketing your product, really.
Thanks, Julia. Truda.
So I've kind of got quite a different take on this when I thought about this question. I think one of the most important things you need is to be resilient, because having worked in publicity for all my working life, you have to learn to take lots of no's before you get the yeses, and then think about what's another strategy. So I mean that doesn't apply quite so much to building social media platform, because there you can broadcast to people, and you can build an audience, and but even there, of course, you get various different knockbacks, and you might hear things you don't want to hear. And I think it is about actually having resilience and learning from when things don't quite go right.
Thank you.
You said you'd be prepared to say no to stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you should say yes to everything.
No, I think you get said no. You think people say no to you a lot.
Right. Okay,
but you should say yes to everything.
Say yes to
Definitely.
Although I use social media, and lots of our authors use social media, I think possibly we're coming at a little tipping point where it may not be as useful as it used to be. I quite like mystery with authors. One of my favourite authors, a guy called Percival Everett, who's American. He's never had a social media presence. He doesn't do interviews. He doesn't do events, whatever. When you find his books, it's like having a secret unveiled to you, and then you end up reading all 26 of them. And he's an incredible writer, and he's kind of from a slightly earlier, maybe sort of 20 years ago era, and he's still writing now. But I think he would probably not suit social media. And I think, from my perspective, running a small independent publishing house, our authors have to do lots of work for, alongside of us. But I think it's a bit of a fallacy from my perspective. I get it from other parts of the industry and more commercial spaces, but I think actually using social media as kind of one of the main things to do, I think is we may be moving past that fairly soon, particularly with sort of in terms of curating yourself or being authentic or whatever that means. The writing still has to stand up. And if it doesn't stand up and you're on social media, you're in a hell of a lot of trouble.
That's true for all the marketing in the world, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but I just feel like there has been quite a big discourse around authors needing social media profiles, and I think that was true 5 or 6 years ago, and I don't know if it's still necessarily relevant in the next set of 5 years. I don't know.
So do you think in the current environment where there is the opportunity for individuals to get their own stories out, publishers to a certain extent rely on authors doing that, and we can debate whether or not that's a reasonable thing? I mean, how much do you think the authors should be doing the work, and how much do you think their publishers should? And obviously you've got both hats on. And another bit of the question for Truda to answer potentially is when should you get external help if you're being expected to do quite a lot of the heavy lifting yourselves?
I think the publishers do as much as they possibly can. We have authors who are very shy and don't like doing public events, so I don't make them do public events. I think that's unfair, and I think it's something that actually maybe is more negative than it is positive. So if they're anxious and they don't like meeting people face to face, that's totally fine. They don't have to do that. But on the other hand, if you get an author who's really willing to do everything, it's like a godsend, and you just give them stuff to do. But I think the impetus and the emphasis, from my perspective, and we only do 8 books a year, so this is not something that's sustainable for some publishing house that's doing 3 a day or whatever, is if we construct kind of what we want them to do, and then we give them a list of all the things they should be doing, and then if they can execute all those things, it's great, and if they can't, try at least to do the ones that you can do. So, does that make sense?
Absolutely. Truda, I mean, what do you think about getting external help
It's
as an author?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because very often people come to us and it's actually kind of too late. So when should you get help? Earlier than you know you need it. So that's a difficult. So many times people say, "Well, my book came out 2 months ago and nobody cares," and that's a difficult one. But so I think probably what you should be doing is knowing before publication that you're confident that your publisher has a really good plan and that you can help and use your own networks. But if there's something, if you don't feel, and I think people do get a feeling for this early on in the publishing process, if you don't feel that you're going to be a priority for your publisher, if you're published by maybe a larger publisher or even a small one who doesn't have much time, that might be the time to think, maybe I can talk to somebody, maybe even just getting some strategic advice about what would be a good way to structure a campaign, rather than necessarily getting somebody in to do the legwork. On the other hand, if you are extremely busy, you're an author, but you also have other day jobs, then maybe you need somebody to help you actually implement stuff. So for example, we're working with an author at the moment who's a YA author, who's also still has a pretty much full-time job working in telecoms, and he's asked us to help him curate and set up all his, or kind of grow all of his platforms, and that's also a viable thing to do. If it's either you've got the time or you've got the money, basically.
I remember when when the Wetherspoons carpet book was being sort of auctioned and whatever, the thing that actually swung it for me was the marketing plan that I was presented with. So the advances were kind of at a similar level, and then I got the marketing plan from the publishers who eventually did it, which was a sort of division of Vintage, and it was really impressive and kind of hit where I wanted to be positioned. And I think like that's when you get that before the book's even kind of written.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, now I get it. Now I can get on board with this. And I think when you're going for someone outside and you're an author and you're going to an agency, you want to do that before, like as far back as possible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the most effective is if you're sort of 6 months before publication, 3 months before publication, 2 weeks after is not a great time.
I mean, Julie, obviously you're negotiating on behalf of authors all the time when you're talking to the publishers. What do you think the balance? How do you think the balance works best?
Well, I think it's Truda's kind of covered it. Although she didn't specifically say this, but I think it's about being realistic and sort of taking a view on what it is you're actually getting, what you're being offered, how it's going. And I mean, you know, a good agent will be helping you to kind of decode that, discern that. Particularly if you're a first-time author, you don't really know what to expect. You know what you hope for. But I often get clients often say to me, "Oh, you know, is this you know, what will they do? What can we expect?" And you know, 6 months before, 3 months before, it's really clear whether they're getting traction and how it's going and whether the revised plan is actually realistic. And so I think it's about being realistic as well about what your publisher has to offer. If they've paid £8,000 for the book, you know that the likelihood of you getting the full plan, the full Monty is much less than if they paid, you know, 50 or 100,000. That's not always true though. I mean, I've had amazing marketing from places where it has been nearer to, you know, a couple of books for 20,000 or whatever, and then they've done incredible marketing and they've been totally behind it. So it's not always, doesn't always equate to budget. Money doesn't always equate to budget and what they're going to do, but it can certainly be a guide.
Well, on the back of that, I was going to say, Kit, I mean, what are the things that you particularly liked about the Vintage marketing campaign? What do you think made the most difference for your book?
I think probably Waterstone's stuff. So Waterstone selected, I'm not quite sure how this sort of murky dark arts works, but Waterstone selected it as one of their on their Christmas list of 2016, and that meant that it was going to be on like at a table on its own in every Waterstone.
That's very
yeah, and so
they meant your publisher believed in the book.
They believed in the book and they coughed the money up, so
yeah.
That's fine. And I think that was way bigger than, because it's a humour book. It's not going to get reviews in the Sunday Times, you know, like that end of publicity and marketing doesn't exist for that sort of book. So it's all about visibility in bookshops, right? So if you can chuck that behind it, that's fine. And then, you know, a couple of kind of odd features in the sun and, you know, stuff like that is kind of how it all works. But I just wanted to go slightly back to what Julia was saying. So in the smaller publishing, more independent space, we have a lot longer sort of tail for marketing. Like I'm still doing bits and pieces of marketing for books that come out in January, because I have possibly more time and it's more important for me for those books to have a long life, because when you're publishing something and you know, you can't compete with your Penguins and your Hachettes, word of mouth is really the massive. I know it's the key for all books, but if you can keep things sort of like popping along, like I just organised a feature in LA Review of Books for something that came out in January, and that will give it a secondary or third, tertiary, whatever boost, and that doesn't necessarily happen unless the book takes off in bigger publishing houses, whereas this book hasn't taken off, but I love it, so I'm just going to keep pushing it.
But arguably, the author who may be published by a big publisher who's done their 2 months and then they finished because they've got to move on to the next book, the author could do some of that themselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's also what our authors do. I encourage them, like, you know, if there's just write something new, get it out there and link it to the book or whatever. So yeah.
So Truda, your discipline is primarily publicity, and as we've been discussing the rise of social media, are you looking for different results now than you would have been, say, 10 years ago?
Yes, I think we're looking for. I mean, at the end of the day, we're actually working for our clients, so they may be looking for different results. So I mean, there are still people who want particular types of coverage because they feel that that's a good thing to have, not necessarily effective in terms of sales. But I think it's really important now to have. Well, there are two things. One is the kind of media coverage which is eminently shareable. So if you've got the choice between having an exclusive in the Sunday Times or the Observer, so the Sunday Times obviously kind of larger readership in print, but you know, we find even some of the news stories that the Sunday Times does, which are quite explosive about our clients, they just take a while for people to actually get the buzz out there more digitally. So definitely.
Is that because of the
paywall? Yeah. So we find, you know, stories that if that story had been in the Guardian, you know, the phones would have been off the hook. And it's not that it doesn't eventually trickle through, because eventually other journalists write stories about it, but it's actually kind of really limited to the people who read the print paper and the people who subscribe to the online version and other journalists who are reading it to then push it out further. So that's quite interesting. On the other hand, there's still media which you know, can in a single swoop achieve huge sales, and you know, particular broadcast programs, for example. I mean, we had a kids author on Sky Sunrise, and the Amazon effect was huge immediately. You know, so broadcast that, you know, that reaches exactly the right people, but lots of them, in a way that you know, kind of comfortable bubbles on Twitter don't necessarily reach. Also really important.
So so influencers versus press coverage. Yeah. Does it depend on the book to a certain extent? What might drive?
I think it depends. I think you might want bits of both for most books, really. Yeah.
Fantastic.
But it obviously depends, you know, where the audience is. That's at the end of the day what we're looking at. Where are the people who are going to buy this book? What are they reading? What are they consuming? What are they listening to? And that's, you know, that's basically that's the basis of publicity, right? You know, that hasn't changed at all.
There's also the question about price points and stuff like this, right? So when the Wetherspoons book was being talked about and stuff, like they were discussing price points, and I kind of oddly argued for a lower price, which would kind of do me out of money, but I thought you can't have a book about Wetherspoons that's going to cost more than 3 pints of Wetherspoons, right? Because that just, A, it's not a good look, B, half your audience is the people who are going to be drinking the Wetherspoons, right? So like, that's when I realised that marketing is also like that sort of minutiae stuff, where it's like, oh, if it's $6.99 it does this, if it's $8.99 it does that, and Amazon, I'm not okay with the Amazon sort of pricing structures and stuff, but you know.
Well, they choose how they want to discount it. You can't tell them what to price it at, but certainly the starting price. I mean, the pricing is an important part of the marketing mix.
It was PPP, wasn't it? Product Price Promotion. So
and place the last one.
Place, yes,
4Ps.
I missed one of the Ps.
Yeah, so I mean, for self-published authors who are here, and particularly for small authors, I mean, what kind of promotions do you think work best as an effective driver? I mean, do you play around with pricing for the books for Influx?
We try not to, because it affects our margins too much, and we don't have enough capital to kind of absorb that. One of the best things for us when our authors are willing to do things is anybody interviewing them helps. We often do a bookshop tour, so we take them to lots of different independent bookshops, and they meet booksellers, and the booksellers kind of tend to champion them after the book's there, and often they do signed copies, and bookshops can't return signed copies. So.
Signed copies are sold copy.
Yeah.
That authors, when you're in stores, just ask them and then just sign everything.
Don't put that on social media though, that's not. I think it's more, for me, I suppose that the marketing, like we're talking about marketing publicity having a sort of glaring effect, like that's where I don't, because we don't have any budget for proper marketing. It's all the same thing to me, publicity and marketing. It's all about noise. right? And if the noise is just talking to a bookseller in a bookshop, that's as good for me as tweeting about it, as being in an obscure magazine, as whatever else.
You've talked about the importance of, when we were talking earlier about the importance of retailers, certainly. So you tend to be putting your marketing budget, such as it is, into helping authors go around the country to do events, but also you do a lot before that, before selling with retailers. Could you tell us a bit about working with retailers and what you think makes a difference, getting the books in and to get them back books out?
Yeah, so our average print run is about 1,000, and if it does well, we'll just keep kind of reprinting it about that, which means our economies of scale are horrific. But before that, we'll print like maybe 200 or 300 advance copies, and we'll mail them out to our favourite booksellers, to bookshops we haven't made contact with. I'll write generally 300 handwritten notes addressed to a specific bookseller with a little kind of press release, maybe a couple of postcards, that sort of stuff, and you just see that effect. So with our distributors, we can go in and look in the back end, and it'll see how many orders have been placed before the book's out. And if you do, when you kind of hit all the bookshops with that sort of campaign, you can't do it for every book because you can't always afford it. But when we do, they call them dues, as in the sort of pre-orders. They just rack up, like, because booksellers get the book and they're like, oh, this looks quite interesting, I'll go for it then. And then it will come in 4 months' time or whatever. And then they're also aware of the book and they're talking about it, and they might see it somewhere else on social media, and that sort of stuff kind of coalesces into. That's where our main marketing money goes, because we can't pay what's there so people.
No, but I was really impressed that for a small publisher like you can get cut through, because obviously the book publishers aren't doing that with a lot of their books, not the hand selling to individual stores. But I know that when we do it, it makes a difference.
I think that's where authors can come in as well, because just to get things in perspective, Kit said he does a 1,000 print run. I mean, you're talking about literary fiction, right?
Yeah.
And just to put this in perspective, if a literary fiction debut for a large publisher, but obviously they have their literary fiction imprints which almost act like sort of boutique publishers within themselves, if they sell the hardback 500 copies, that's not a failure.
No.
And if that individual author lives in, I don't know, Canterbury, and they go to the bookshops within a 20-mile radius, and they go in personally, you spend a couple of months beforehand going in personally, and each of those bookshops has someone who's kind of going to champion the book and hand sell 10, 20, 30 copies. That is potentially half of a respectable sales for the hardcover of a debut literary fiction author.
Absolutely, and in similarly events, and I know you touched on it, it doesn't work for authors who are not comfortable, but for the people who are, I mean, looking for events, it's both a great way of working with partners, which is another way of extending marketing reach. I mean, do you do events presumably all the time?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's interesting, actually, we were chatting today about some of the sort of best campaigns that have happened recently, and of course I've now forgotten the name of the author of the book, but apparently somebody did brilliantly by doing some rapping at a South Bank Centre event recently, and her sales kind of went through the. So it was just one of your standard South Bank literary events, and got lots of kind of coverage and cut through. So you can just like you say, there's the sales that you're inevitably going to get through having an event, the relationships you're building, but you can also actually push it even further and have to do something just a little bit different that cuts through, and then people take more notice of the book.
And partnerships, Julia, particularly for some of your non-fiction authors, I think partnerships are often harder for. For commercial, you can pay for partnerships with big brands. We certainly do that at the Little Brand quite a bit. But I mean, have you got experiences of any of your non-fiction authors who have maybe other organisations or businesses that they work with where that's worked?
Well, at the moment, I've got a book coming out this Thursday. Called Period Power, which is about periods and hormones, which is a huge subject that a year and a half ago everyone wanted one. And there's several.
We're publishing one too.
Yeah, but mine's better.
Yeah.
And so the last couple of weeks, the publisher they've done an amazing job. They've been completely on it. She's also just got a really big network. Herself, the author Maisie Hill, plug. And in the last 2 weeks, not a day has gone by without an organisation or a publication or something getting in touch either journal requests or to do events. And so for something like, for her, obviously there are organisations and campaigning groups, and it's huge at the moment. So Bloody Good Period have been all over it, and they're just wanting to work with her, and everyone else has got on board. So that's something where it's just made for partnerships.
Yeah, and you're going straight to a target audience who's already signed up to the organisation or the business or whoever it is. The boring sort of back-end stuff, metadata, and some of the digital options that are available for both self-published authors and for small publishers and for big authors. I mean, how important is metadata, and what do you need to put in it, Julia or Kit?
Julia.
Okay. It's hugely important for everything, and it's something that clever publishers will be messing around with all the time. I mean, they've got a whole basement full of these people that, some of the bigger publishers, all the techie people sit in the basement and change the metadata, and there are BIC codes, which you've probably heard of, and BISAP codes, and they're about categories, and then there's metadata, which is, you can also have keywords and that kind of thing. And also, so for a good example would be, I've got an author with a small publisher who unfortunately are not as nimble and agile as many other small publishers, and are way less on that kind of thing than they should be. And it took a long time and a lot of pushing to get them to put the book into smaller categories. And as soon as they did, the book went up from, in the at best about 150,000 in the Amazon rankings, got up to the top at one point less than 2,000 after finally getting them to put the book in these micro categories. And the second book, they bought two books, first two books in a series, and the second book is set on a vineyard. And I spent a long time trying to persuade them to put it in winemaking, which is obviously a completely erroneous non-fiction category. But that's what big publishers do. And
so some of it's cheating,
some of it's cheating.
Massage.
Yeah, some of it's cheating, some of it's massage, but it works, and it's really, really important.
Yeah, I was going to say. So Spoons, Carpets and Appreciation is still number one in rugs, antiques, collectibles, and 5 other categories, all combined together. And it's been number one in there for 2 years, consistently, because it's probably the only book.
Yeah, you can sell about 20 books and be number one in certain categories. But what that does is it increases visibility as well. So Amazon, more people will be shown or served or whatever the book by Amazon.
The thing that I when I understood how these nefarious activities work is
it's the real dark arts of marketing.
Yeah, it really is. So we had a book came out 2 years ago called Hold Tight, Black Masculinity, Millennials and the Meaning of Grime. It's all about grime music and sort of growing up as a black man in London. First book about grime really that came out. There was one before, but it wasn't quite. It was more picture booky and historical. This is more like an analysis of the music genre. Did really well. Author's great, brilliant. All the events, blah blah whatever. A couple of grime books came after that. One by Dan Hancock, which is published by William Collins, I think. And there was another one which was an autobiography of Wiley, who's like the sort of founder of the movement. It's published by William Heinemann. And I figured out what they were doing because I typed in the title of our book on Amazon, and their books came up. I was like, how do they do this? And I chatted to a couple of people I know. And just tagging the book name of our book on their metadata. So now every book we do, I'm like, right, what books?
Amazon tells you not to do it, but seeing as it clearly works, there's no reason to. So the big publishers try not to do it because they've been told by Amazon, and But so that segues into something that I think I probably know more about than everyone else on the panel, which is Amazon Marketing Services, which a lot of individual publishers, it's small publishers, but self-published authors are also doing, which is an amazing self-service tool, and you can use sort of tens of pounds, very little money whatsoever. And you can target all sorts of keywords. It's a bit like using social tags on Amazon, and you can put in sort of a £50 campaign over a 2-month period, for instance. But that often will serve up books. So your metadata will serve up organic, but the paid for searches you can buy depending on the categories that you're potentially publishing in or bidding against. for very little money. The other thing that I don't think you necessarily do much of, given your budget, is Facebook advertising. And Mark Dawson, who's spoken on panels here in the past, is an absolute legend in the self-publishing world generally, but he uses Facebook advertising in the same way. We use it a lot, as a big publisher. We find AMS increasingly more useful because you can tie it directly to sales, but I know Facebook as a way of building lists for publishers, for small publishers and for self-published authors is a very effective way of getting directly to the audiences, particularly if you're a genre.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think the
author.
thing about Facebook advertising is how targeted you can be and really find the right people. And they have got so much better, haven't they? Facebook. I remember when I was 40 to 20 years ago, they suddenly, like the day happened that I was 40, and suddenly they started advertising really frumpy cardies, and I was so angry. But they're so much better now. They serve me stuff, like things about shoes that I like, and and that just shows you how targeted you can be. Particularly, we've got a book that has, and I think it's partly about exploring and finding out, what are the angles to my book, even if it's fiction, what are the particular interest points that you can then really drill down and find individual audiences like that.
Yeah, the same way you when you're writing, you know who you're writing for,
Yeah.
right? If you're an author, there, like you have to imagine who your market is. You can't just write for everyone because not everyone's going to read your book.
I think it's
right?
interesting that you say that, because I get approached by a lot of people who clearly don't know this and haven't given it much thought. So I would say that that's a really good
It's
point.
like pre-marketing.
In the very act
Yeah.
of writing, who are you writing for? And a lot of people are concerned when we start talking about this kind of thing, because they think it's reductive and they think it's trying to fit them in a box, but it's really not about that. It's actually about thinking about your reader. And actually that's the primary marketing thing that you could do, thinking about your reader, because actually in the end you're trying to, the selling chain is a long one. If you want to go the traditional publishing route, you're marketing yourself to an agent who's going to be trying to sell you to an editor who has to share you with their editorial colleagues and some of their sales and marketing colleagues in different departments first, before they can take it to acquisitions and sell it to sales, and then sales have to sell it to the retailers, and the retailers have to sell it to the readers. And yes, we talk a lot about reaching readers directly, but you have to remember that you are the very first link. If any of those links of the selling chain are broken, then it's not going to work. And it's actually all about who, a lot of the time, even when even if you've got an agent and the agent loves what you're doing, we still sometimes get editors say, the thing is, I really love the writing and she's really wonderful and the characterization's amazing, but I just don't quite have a vision of who this is for.
So the thinking is the same, actually, from all of the links of the sales channel.
Who's it for? Yeah.
Or if you're selling direct, you need to know who it's for.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, how are you going to get the messaging right? How are you going to use the right channels to find them?
Yeah.
Any other bits on digital, Truda, perhaps before we do the last question? We were talking a bit about websites and YouTube and videos.
Yeah, I mean, video is really, you just reach so many more people through video, and that's what we've been doing a lot of in our prize campaigns, and we've just been finding that it's just so much more engaging, and it's short bits of video, and it's placing it on various different social channels, and again, it's kind of almost micro payments in terms of how you can boost that to then reach a really large audience, but a really well targeted one.
And what about Facebook Live? Because again, a lot of big publishers, small publishers, and self-published authors have been using Facebook Live, and that costs nothing at all.
Yeah, exactly. And again, if you're doing getting the right kind of message out there, then you can really do well with that.
How are you linking that? From the video, what's the step to then buying the book? Like, how far away are you from, in terms of your click-throughs?
Yeah, we're not doing it so much for individual books actually with our video stuff, but I think it has to have a call to action. So a lot of the stuff we're doing is to do with prizes. So it's a call to action to go to the website or whatever. So that link has got to be to a
Video is very good for teasers ahead of publication, so it's to drive awareness often. It's to get people intrigued by a book, but you can use it for all sorts of things. So finally, what's the best piece of book marketing you've seen this year, and why do you think it was effective? Julia, do you want to go first?
Well, so I said to you earlier, I've got a cheaty answer to one of
Yeah.
the questions. So to me, and I'm not going to say, well, this campaign was amazing, because I'm not really a marketing person, and that's not necessarily what I'm aware of noticing, I should say. Obviously, I notice it subliminally. But to me, marketing's most effective when the book is visible. And yes, obviously, some of it's about paid promotions and stuff like that, which isn't, I don't know if you call that marketing or if that all comes under the same umbrella. But there are 2 books, I've now forgotten what the second one is, I'm going to have to look it up. There are 2 books that I think have been just hugely visible. I know what it is. So one of them is Debut, and that's My Sister, the Serial Killer. And I just think whoever was in charge of that was a genius, and it was just in every bookshop window in town has a window display that seemed to be almost entirely devoted to that book. So yes, some of that's paid marketing, but actually everyone was talking about it, and it just so broke the mould of it was just so different. It was short. It was it was nothing that most people here would kind of recognise as being familiar, and it just ended up being this incredibly commercial success. And another book, what I love to see, passionately love to see, is an author that I love and that I've thought of as being successful already, but has apparently, and in terms of how their publisher views it, not broken out yet, so not had their big success yet. And that author for me was Louise Candlish, who Our House, which was, I guess it was published quite early last year in hardback. And her previous book was The Swimming Pool, which I absolutely loved. And in my mind, she'd been on my radar for a long time. And then I had breakfast with her editor, who at the publisher, which is actually she'd moved to a new publisher for Our House. And it was about to be published, and she was very excited. And she said, this is going to be her breakout book. And it was everywhere, and everyone was talking about it. And I love to see that, because she's worked very hard and she's a great writer.
Thank you, Truda.
So I haven't got a note, but the book that we sort of discussed this internally, because obviously we're watching these campaigns all the time, and my colleague brought to my attention Stacey Hall's, I can't remember the title.
The Familiars.
The Familiars, that's it, which has been really great bestseller, and I think we thought that was really admirable campaign, because it had just lots and lots of coverage, and it was lots of different angles, written pieces for different magazines. And Stacey, I think, used to work at the Bookseller and now works in women's magazines, so she had really understood how to kind of break down her story into lots of different ways and for lots of different audiences.
I'll do a small press version, I think. So there's a publisher called Galley Beggar, who published Ema McBride's first book. That's probably what they're most famous for. They have a book coming out which is about 900 pages, which is obviously, and it's 1 sentence long. How do you market that? I mean, what they've done is they've taken a picture of every book they've got on their bookshelves and put the big fat book that they're publishing next to it on 40%, and then the next one is like about 65%, and then Middlemarch comes up and it's not quite as big as ours. And it's kind of this long string of like playing with the idea that this is the biggest book you're ever going to read, and they've done these tote bags that says this book is so this book is so big it deserves its own tote bag, like that sort of stuff, and all this collateral around it it's the book's it's called Ducks something, I can't remember the name, that's bad, but their books are great, but they're very kind of like, they're quite modernist, and they can be quite experimental, so it can be quite kind of difficult to get past that reputation of being like difficult, like Milkman was and stuff like that, and which is not difficult. It's a brilliant book, but it had this reputation of being difficult. And I think what they're doing is trying to make it more fun. That you might buy this 900-page novel, which is an interesting, intellectually challenging book, but actually the way they're marketing it is just like, here's a fat book. Do you want to buy that? Here's a challenge. Can you read the biggest book that's available? That's with no budget. Like that's just.
But they mix the message with the book.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can I mention something else? So because Truda mentioned The Familiars, which is also published by Boyne Zaffa, and I would just mention them as a publisher who's absolutely brilliant. So agents get this a lot when you're editor is pitching to you to buy the book that you're selling, and they're like, oh, we're going to do, you ask them about marketing, and we're going to do a digital marketing campaign. That doesn't mean anything. Actually, it doesn't mean anything. So you say, what are you going to do? And they're like, oh, well, we've got this Facebook page, and we're going to tweet. And you're kind of like, well, okay, but what are you going to do? So I think that one of the things that they did so well with the Familiars, and I love the way that Truda pointed out, there are all these different things that kind of combined. But they do fantastic digital marketing, and they leverage their community. So my example is an author that I've got coming out with them in September, and they also do have a really long lead into publication. So it's publishing in September. Before Christmas they sent out the first teaser email. So just to give you the stats, they sent it out to their community of 700 plus bloggers and readers and influencers and people that they use to help them with their marketing. Within 24 hours, 130 people had tweeted or retweeted about it and responded and used their hashtag. And it has just kind of really snowballed. And then they have a sort of staged campaign, so there's a teaser, no one even knows what the book's called at this point, and those 130 people were responding to that, an email that that had been opened and responded to within 24 hours. And then of course then it sort of snowballed because people were there was the call to action, they were asked to do something in order to receive a proof, and then they know that it's if you're part of that community, there are certain expectations. You get this proof and in return you are expected to do certain things in order to remain part of that community and be part of that kind of inner circle of people who get to read these books early. And it's about kind of offering something to the people that you've kind of brought in to do this unpaid work for you, essentially. So publishers that are clever are using huge communities of people that they are not paying to do their marketing for them. I mean, obviously it costs because they've got to send proofs out, etc. But
and you do get kickback from the sort of semi-professional book bloggers about that idea that people write them and say, will you just do this for me? I think they must have been very clever to gather that community.
There seems to be certainly a lot of goodwill.
There has to be an authenticity to it.
I think authenticity is an absolutely key aspect.
Otherwise you get Fire Festival.
But I think it was exciting. I mean, they sent me the email that they'd sent out, and you really felt like you were being part of, they were telling a story with the email, and it was in the book is a ghost story, and the whole thing was just was beautifully done, very slick, quite creepy. So you were being offered something. It wasn't just a piece of marketing blur.
Exactly.
Creativity and authenticity. And tote bags. I was really glad that you brought tote bags into it. Thank you very much, panel. Shall we open it out to the audience? Who's got some questions? There's one little back there on the side.
I've got.
Hang on, let's give you a mic.
Okay, do you want to say your name as well when you...
Hi, thank you very much for a really interesting session. My name's Andy Lapalta. Got two really quick questions if I can, quick answer ones. One of them is book launches. Are they all ego, or do they actually have a role in the marketing of the book? And the second one is, my new book's coming out in October, so I've got a meeting coming up with my publisher shortly, with the marketing team. What's the one thing I should be asking that marketing team to do to make sure that book takes off?
Judy, do you want to answer the first one?
Yes, so I think on the whole, book launches are less popular than they used to be. I think that a lot of them were about author care.
Yeah.
They're about the publishers. So actually, stroking the author's ego.
Yeah.
However, there are occasions on which getting together a community could be a brilliant thing. So I think, I hope that gets followed through, the kind of thing that you were talking about there. And then if people are then sort of sharing about that evening, if there could be something about it that is newsworthy, if it's really very different, then it can be worth doing. And who doesn't love a party? But just the idea that you have to have a party is, it's not going to probably sell you.
I totally disagree. Fundamentally, but launch parties for us are they're not really parties because we can't afford to pay for the wine, but they're quite big events for us. So I get where you're coming from totally. from that perspective. My example would be the grind book I told you about. So we did it at Rough Trade East record store. It's a book about music, right? So we do it in there. I invited maybe 300 people from across, like people who are big readers, people from the media, people from the authors community, stuff like that. 95% of them came. We sold maybe 200 books on the night.
Wow.
And it was just rammed full to the brim of like all sorts of people from the black community or people from the music community, and they all came together and they were all talking about one book, and they're all going home with the same book, feeling like they've been part of a genuinely new kind of book publishing launch. And it works when you've got a community ready to be.
That was a hard-working event. You probably
Yeah.
had the panel. You probably had them talking as well, didn't
Yeah,
you?
it did,
So
yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't just a party. I think there's quite a difference between a launch event, especially when you do it with a partner like particularly rough trade, like a retailer, and just a party that might be in a nice venue and it's
Sure.
just cocktails
All
and
our
canapes.
launches are based around sort of a panel talk or some sort of there's something extra to just. I know my book's out now. Great. Let's have some more warm white wine and whatever. But yeah. So I guess I do agree and I don't agree at the same time.
And to the second question, I mean, I've got a couple of thoughts, but what do you think? What he should be asking the marketing team?
For communication, I think what I find really problematic, and this is something that sort of Truda raised earlier, is once you get to a certain point in the process, it's too late. And if they haven't told you what they're doing and how you can help and what they expect of you, then it's all a bit of a kind of, you can end up feeling like you've been fobbed off and you've been promised things that haven't been fulfilled. So actually, the main thing I always ask for is, can you let us know what's happening? And as the agent, I always insist on being CC'd in on everything.
I think we expect agents to be CC'd on everything.
But you'd be surprised how many people don't sort of follow through on that, and how many people don't ask for it, and it's about how you ask things, I guess.
And I think that's a really important thing, because actually I think there's rarely a campaign where things go exactly as you planned. So something might not be working, and certainly as a PR agency, we are constantly reporting back to our clients. We're saying, look, actually we told you this was going to happen, we tried it out and actually it's not, so this is what we're going to do instead. And that's what people need to hear.
Exactly. I mean, you can absolutely, publishing is alchemy at every stage. So, you never quite know what's going to happen, and you never quite know what's going to work, and every now and again everything works perfectly, and that's wonderful. But it really is about kind of being very sort of responsive and kind of just switching. If that's not working, then go that way. And I think particularly if a campaign's been left to maybe more junior people, they don't always feel confident to go, this didn't work, and so they just hide
it.
And that's just the worst possible thing. So that's what I would be asking for. Please just let me know what's happening.
But I would also want to know who they see the audience as being and how they are intending to reach them.
I'd hope you'd know that by now.
I would hope that they. Well, if it depends. If this is the first marketing meeting that you're having, they should be giving you.
I presume
they should be
publication meeting.
They should be giving you a plan for what they're planning to do, and it should be fairly detailed. And if you're not getting it at the first meeting, you want to get it soon afterwards, because that will give you a sense.
But I think you said your
what
book's
work they're going to be doing. You said October.
Oh, October.
No, it's ages. Okay, lots of time. But if they don't come to they need to come to the meeting, if not with a plan, with at least their ideas, and you would hope to get a plan soon after that, so that you know the sort of size of campaign they're planning on doing and whether or not you agree with the direction of it. Any other questions? On the middle there, Claire.
Okay, here you go. Stand up first.
Oh my God. Okay. Hello, Claire Somerville. How far do you think it is incumbent, or to what degree is it incumbent for publishers or PR agencies to guide and constrain authors' social media output? Because how do you control that balance between freedom of expression, creativity, and keeping your authors on message and not letting them go off-piste and AWOL?
That's a really interesting question. We were actually in conversation at the moment with Index on Censorship about kind of coming up with some workshops with people about how to use social media and avoid pitfalls, but also how to express yourself. So I don't think I would want to constrain any author that I was working with. I think I would want to give them guidelines about what things might be a problem and that might then trip them up later on. But I think we talked about authenticity. I think authenticity is so important that I wouldn't want to be constraining anybody.
No, it wouldn't occur to me,
Yeah.
frankly, given that authenticity is so important.
But that's also really tails back to what I was saying at the very beginning. Is if you're, having a social media account and you can't be authentic and you haven't got much, you don't feel like you've got much to say, it's almost worse to actually say some stuff, right? Like you might as well just be mysterious and let people decide for themselves who you are or what you think. But in terms of curtailing, I think because I commission the books and then work with other people doing marketing and publicity, I'm at the process all the way along, as well as doing everything whatever else. But I've already put my faith in that writer, so I'm like, why would I curtail what you're going to say? Because I believe in what you say, but otherwise I wouldn't publish your book, right? So I think that's kind of, at the same time, you might have to fight some fires at some point. I don't know.
I have definitely said
imagine being Bret Easton Ellis's.
I've said to authors, you might want to delete that tweet. So it's not about who they are or their persona.
Yeah.
It's about, you probably shouldn't have said that at that point. Maybe you'd like to take that down.
Yeah, I think that's okay to say.
Yeah, I think it's probably more the job of the agent possibly to protect the author from themselves rather than the publisher, I would suggest.
Yeah, I would agree.
Any other questions? Someone more the back.
Hi, my name is David. I wondered if you had any recommendations on ebook pricing. For example, if your book is 10,000 words or 80,000 words, if you go on Amazon, if you recommended, that book is $2.99 or $5.99, if there was a kind of almost like, I don't want to pay that because it's too low or it's too high, what do you recommend them?
I work with people who look at this every minute, every day. We at Little Brown, obviously at the big publishers, there's quite a lot of strategy behind it. I'm not as au fait with it as perhaps I could be. We're very keen not to devalue the books too much, but we will price promote quite regularly. We do a lot of looking at the difference. We're always trying to see if we can flywheel books. So books that may normally be at a $2.99 price point, we'll do at 99p for a Kindle daily deal, or possibly even for a Kindle monthly deal, and they have to be selected by Amazon, but we submit them. And we'll often use the first book in an author's series if they have a longer series, particularly if they've got a new book coming out. And what we want to do is see if, you obviously get quite a lot of orders when a book is priced at 99p. What you want to do is see when the book will carry on selling when you put the price back up again to $1.99. Sometimes you might put it back up in phases. Sometimes you leave it down for 99p for a month if it's on the Kindle monthly deal, but ultimately you're trying to attract more people to the book that will be sustained after the price point has gone back up. If you're a big publisher, you don't generally want to be selling lots and lots of books at 99p. That's not the business that we're in. I mean, there are ebook publishers who would rather sell hundreds of thousands of books at 99p. But I think different models work for different publishers. So if you're self-publishing, I think it's worth trying it out. But I think you need to submit for Kindle Daily and Kindle Monthly deals. You could also look at BookBub as well. That's another area that we spend a little bit of marketing money on because you have to pay for inclusion in BookBub newsletters. That can be £50 or £200 depending on the size of the mailing that it's going out to.
I think it also depends on the genre as well, right?
Yes.
Because, we mainly do sort of fairly creative non-fiction or literary, creative non-fiction or literary fiction. The price changes don't seem to make too much difference to us. It sits at $5.99 if it's a $9.99 book. If it's $8.99 book, it sits at $4.99. If we drop the price, people assume it's not literary fiction anymore, and they're like, "Oh, it must be genre." Because why would someone pay $2.99 for a literary fiction book?
I think it's a very good point.
Right?
It's much more relevant for genre
difference.
fiction.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It totally depends on what you're writing. Kind of depends on where you want to mark.
More than the length of the book.
Yeah, the length of the book is, unless it's a novella or something really short.
I bought Edouard Louis' new hardback book, which is about 70 pages. I ended up paying $12.99 for it, like a sucker. Like, no, I got it in a hardback, but I'm like, I've just paid for 70 pages, and it's like almost like 30p a
Pamphlet,
page.
that is.
Like,
Pamphlet, isn't it?
yeah. So when there's people like me out there still, I don't think that the length of it really matters.
You've had your hand up first, go ahead.
Thank you. I have an observation and a question. So, just in terms of the observation, I think when you are marketing books, we tend to sort of concentrate quite a lot on channels, and channels are obviously important for reach. But I think we shouldn't underestimate how important it is to get the angle of the book right, because you can kind of reach as many people as you want, but unless the book is being positioned in a really interesting way, and there's a really good idea behind the book to push it, it just isn't going to make any impact on readers. So I think we shouldn't underestimate how hard that is for marketing teams to get that right. So if people are sort of talking to publishers now, I think that's also an important question. It's not just about reach. Yeah. And my other question is, do you see a difference between marketing plans for debut writers, first-time writers who are coming up with their first book, and established writers?
Definitely. I mean,
What sorts of...
proofs are very important for debut authors. Getting the word out, getting people excited, introducing the writers to people for the first time. And we proof a lot of literary fiction anyway, but I think proofs are really, really important on the literary side and the commercial side as well, I would say. You need to get a buzz building. And then once, for established authors, you're always talking about their sales record. And sometimes you're having to massage that a bit, you're having to reposition it, because maybe the new book is better than the last ones, perhaps haven't delivered, or they've been fantastic and the sales record speaks for themselves. But first, getting the first books out is, we definitely have different plans for debuts.
And is the buzz also around the author as opposed to just the book? Yeah.
A lot of the time it is, especially if they've got a story to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, do we have your, I think, last question,
One last
here
question.
from Rachel? There you go, so
Hi, I'm Rachel. Still kind of starting off with writing really, but I love writing in different genres, but I wanted to ask, as a marketing thing, is that not a good idea to start with writing, sort of, or wanting to write, and being interested in a couple, a few different genres? Is that not a good idea for starting out? Should I just be focusing on one?
I imagine we all have a view on this. Do you want us to go first, Julia?
If you want to go the traditional route and you want to submit to agents, you're only going to submit one book at a time anyway. So I would focus on the bit that you feel most confident in, and I would just make that focus the book rather than worrying. But I'll tell you a story. There's a, I don't know if I should mention her name, she's amazing. Maybe I just will, that's alright, isn't it? So Sarah Pinborough, who's now firmly kind of really writing thrillers, psychological thrillers. She wrote a lot of fantasy, and she's always been great, and she was published by Orion when I was there, and everyone thought she was fantastic. But she wanted to write in different genres, and she did that. And at one point, one of the senior publishers there, who also thought she was great, said, it's really hard. It's really hard for us. We want to build you, but we're struggling because you keep switching genre. And even though we love your books, we're struggling to make you as big as we think you should be. I think you should stick to one genre, and I think that should be thrillers. And Sarah was not keen at that time. She wasn't ready. So she went through she carried on doing what she was doing, and we published her books, and people loved them, but they didn't buy them in enormous quantities. They bought them in respectable quantities. And then she did a YA book, which was a thriller, and it was fantastic. And then she just made that change, and she did that when she was ready. So, I mean, I don't know quite what I was trying to say with that story, but it's just a kind of example of actually you've got to do what you've got to do. And you can't constrain yourself until you're ready, but equally you're only going to be sending out one book to an agent, so pick the one you feel most comfortable writing.
But people do move genres, but it depends whether you're doing it after a first book that's, you know,
And actually, that's what agents will help you with, is kind of career strategy as well. And like, it's like, who do you want to be today? And you can be that person under a different name as well. So a really good example of that is someone like Claire McGowan, who writes as Eva Woods.
Yeah.
So she writes as Claire McGowan, she writes crime, and as Eva Woods, she writes women's commercial fiction. And she was already quite established in crime, and then she wanted to do both. So that's how she
Nora Roberts, who's one of our biggest authors, publishes as JD Robb, and JD Robb are police procedurals, and she writes 3 different genres as Nora Roberts. But then she's Nora Roberts, she's very big. And Ian Banks was M. Banks for his sci-fi.
hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
Wait,
but he was
the same people.
But he was signalling, you know, it's a slightly different brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't do that.
There you go.
I think you're right. I think it's because of the hiding in plain sight thing.
Yeah.
But some people do choose to write under a pseudonym for one part of their writing because they find that their audiences get confused otherwise. I think it depends on how completely different they are.
That's really useful, thank you.
Lovely. Well, thank you. I'd love to thank my panel, Kit, Truda and Julia. You've all been fantastic this evening. Thank you for all of your insights and expertise.
I think that was fantastic, really interesting. Nice diverse panel, and Hermione, brilliant chairing. Thank you so much, and you knew me, thanks.
No, I really didn't.
No, I think you did.
You really didn't.
That's not my area of reading.
Okay, so thank you so much, guys. And I want to remind you about the short story things. Please do submit your stuff. We want to try and promote you. And if you're not already a member, see Rebecca over here, or you can join our reading list here. But really, what we should be doing is thanking Hermione and Julia and Truda and Kit. They're absolutely fantastic. So thanks so much. Please do stay and network. There's lots of fantastic people in the room, including these guys. And thanks very much for coming. Thank you.